me to sit in the waiting area, not the waiting area inside the hospital where the chairs are padded and there's a coffee machine in the corner and a TV mounted on the wall showing the news. No, the waiting area they meant was a wooden bench outside the main entrance, underneath the overhang, next to the automatic doors that kept sliding open every time someone walked past. It was November, in Ohio, and I had driven 2.5 hours to be there. My son's name is Adrian. He's 39 years old, works in pharmaceutical sales, makes more money than I ever did in my life. His wife's name is Stephanie. She's 36, a dental hygienist, has very white teeth and very strong opinions about how things should be done. They have a daughter, my granddaughter, who was born on a Tuesday morning, and I found out about it on a Thursday afternoon when Adrian sent me a text that said, "She's here, mom and baby, doing great." No phone call. Just a text. I was standing in my kitchen making soup when I read it. I had to sit down, not because I was unhappy. I was overwhelmed, the good kind, the kind that hits you behind the eyes. But because I realized reading those 7 words that I had not been called. I had not been part of this. The baby had already been in the world for 2 days before anyone thought to tell me. I told myself it was fine. New parents are tired. Adrian was probably exhausted. Stephanie had just gone through labor. I made excuses the way mothers do, the way we've been trained to make excuses, the way we smooth over the rough edges of things so we don't have to feel what's actually happening. I sent back a string of heart emojis and asked when I could visit. He said he'd let me know. I want to tell you a little bit about who I was before I tell you what happened next, because I think it matters. I'm 64 years old. I live alone in a house in Dayton that I bought with money I saved over 30 years of working as a school librarian. My husband, Gerald, passed 9 years ago. Heart attack, sudden, no warning. The kind of death that leaves you standing in a grocery store parking lot, wondering if you remembered to lock the front door and then realizing, slowly, that you will never stop wondering things like that. We had 2 children. Adrian, the youngest, and my daughter Patrice, who lives in Portland now with her wife and calls me every Sunday without fail. Adrian was always the one I worried about more, not because he wasn't capable, he is, always has been, but because he was the one who needed more from me. Or maybe I just gave him more. That's the question I've been sitting with for years, and I still don't have a clean answer. When he was in college, I sent money every month, even though he had financial aid and a part-time job. When he moved into his first apartment, I helped with the deposit and the first 3 months of rent. When he met Stephanie and they got serious, I paid for their engagement photos because she wanted a particular photographer that cost $1,200, and Adrian said they were a little short that month. I didn't think twice. That's what mothers do, I told myself. You help. I helped when they bought their house. I helped when Adrian's car needed a new transmission. I helped when Stephanie wanted to redo the kitchen and they came up $4,000 short. I helped and I helped and I helped, and I told myself that's what love looks like. Showing up, being useful, being the person who says yes. The baby's name is Claire. I learned that from Instagram. Stephanie posted a photo 2 days after Adrian's text. A close-up of tiny fingers curled around Stephanie's thumb. The caption reading, "Welcome to the world, Claire Elise. We are so in love." 347 likes in the first hour. I was not tagged. I found the post by going to Stephanie's profile directly, something I did sometimes just to see photos of their life, their house, their vacations, the things I wasn't invited into. I sat with my phone for a long time after that. I read the comments. Friends of theirs congratulating them. Stephanie's mother, who I had met exactly twice, wrote, "My heart is so full, already planning my visit," with 17 heart emojis. Her mother was already planning her visit. I finally called Adrian. He answered on the 4th ring, sounded tired but okay. I told him congratulations, told him Claire was a beautiful name, asked again when I could come. He said, "Soon, Mom, we're just getting settled." I asked if Stephanie's mother had been there already. There was a pause, just half a second. The kind of pause that tells you everything. Then he said, she came for the delivery. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to say anything. He said, I'll call you when things calm down a little. Things calmed down. He didn't call. 3 weeks passed. I sent a small gift, a pale yellow blanket I had crocheted myself, the same pattern I used for Adrian when he was born. Took me 6 weeks to finish, and I got a text back from Stephanie that said, so sweet, thank you, followed by a sun emoji, 1 emoji, 6 weeks of my hands and 1 emoji. When Adrian finally invited me to visit, Claire was 5 weeks old. I was so relieved I almost cried on the phone. He gave me a date, a Saturday in December, and I marked it on my calendar in red pen, circled it, counted down to it the way I used to count down to it the way I used to count down to Christmas when the kids were small. I drove up on a Friday night and stayed at a Hampton Inn 20 minutes from their house. I didn't want to impose by asking to stay with them. I brought gifts, a soft toy lamb, a set of wooden blocks with the alphabet, a casserole I had made and frozen and packed in a cooler. I had my hair done the Wednesday before. I ironed my blouse the morning I drove up. I pulled into their driveway at 9:58, 2 minutes before the time Adrian had told me to come. I sat in the car for a moment, just breathing, just feeling the particular kind of happiness that I think only grandmothers understand. This second chance at wonder, this small new person who carries some part of you forward into the world. The front door opened before I even got to the porch. It was Stephanie, not Adrian. She was holding Claire against her chest in one of those carrier wraps, the kind that keeps the baby close and facing in. She looked at me, not unkindly, exactly, but not warmly either, and said, oh, we're actually heading out in a few minutes. We have her newborn photos today. I stopped walking. I said, I thought today was. She said, Adrian forgot to mention it, I think. You can come back after. We should be done by around 2. It was 10 in the morning. She was asking me to come back at 2. I looked at the car in the driveway, Adrian's car. He was inside. He had not come to the door. I said, could I just hold her for a minute before you go? There was a pause. Stephanie shifted Claire slightly, repositioned the carrier strap. She said, she's just fallen asleep. I don't want to unsettle her right before the shoot. I nodded. I said, okay. I don't know why I said okay. I should have said something. I should have said a lot of things. Instead, I walked back to my car and I sat there for a moment looking at the front door, which had already closed, and I thought, I drove 2.5 hours. I have a cooler in my back seat. I ironed this blouse. I drove to a diner on Route 40 and I ordered coffee and eggs, and I sat by the window and I watched it start to snow. Not heavy snow, the decorative kind, the kind that makes Ohio look like a greeting card. I ate my breakfast slowly. I refilled my coffee twice. I called Patrice and she answered on the first ring, and when I told her what happened, she went very quiet, and the way she does when she's trying not to say something she'll regret, she said, Mom, come home. I said, I drove 2.5 hours. She said, I know, come home anyway. I didn't. I sat in that diner until noon. I drove to a bookstore nearby and walked the aisles for an hour without buying anything. I drove back to their house at 2:15, parked, sat in the car and watched the front door. At 2:40, Adrian's car pulled into the driveway. He got out first, then Stephanie with Claire. He looked up and saw me, and there was a flicker of something on his face. Guilt, I think, or something near it. And he raised a hand to wave. They carried everything inside. He came back out and walked to my car, and I got out, and we stood on the driveway, and he hugged me. It was a real hug. Adrian's hugs always were, arms all the way around, chin on the top of my head. But it was also quick. And then he said, come on in, it's cold. Inside, the house was warm and smelled like cinnamon something. A candle or a diffuser, one of those things Stephanie was always ordering online. It was a beautiful house. They had done a lot with it since I'd last seen it. new furniture in the living room, a gallery wall of photographs that I looked at quickly as I passed, not stopping to see whether any of them were of me. None of them were of me. Stephanie was in the bedroom putting Claire down. Adrian brought me tea in a mug I didn't recognize, and we sat at the kitchen island and made the kind of conversation that is mostly not conversation. How was the drive, the weather? Did I find the place okay? He asked about Patrice. He asked about the neighbor's dog that had been sick last time we spoke. He did not ask why I was sitting in their driveway for 40 minutes. He did not say anything about the morning. Stephanie came out after about 15 minutes. She was friendly in the careful way. She was always friendly with me. Not warm, not cold. A kind of managed pleasantness, like customer service. She told me the newborn photos had gone well. She showed me the preview images on her phone, swiping through, and the photographer was talented. The light was soft, and she was extraordinary, wrinkled and pink, and absolutely extraordinary. And I felt the tears come, and I blinked them back because I did not want to cry in front of Stephanie. I asked if I could hold her when she woke up. Stephanie said, "Of course, we'll see when she's ready." Claire woke up at 4:30. Stephanie fed her. At 5, Stephanie handed her to me. I had 17 minutes with my granddaughter. I counted them later, going back over it in my head. 17 minutes before Claire started to fuss, and Stephanie lifted her back and said they needed to start the bedtime routine. I was sitting on the couch with my arms already reaching forward a little, the way arms do when they're holding something, and then suddenly aren't. I drove home that night instead of staying at the Hampton Inn. 2.5 hours back to Dayton in the dark, snow still coming down intermittently, the cooler in the back seat with the casserole I had never taken out. I thought about Gerald the whole way home. I thought about who I was when we were young, who I thought I would be by now. I thought about my hands making that yellow blanket, stitch by stitch, for 6 weeks. The next time Adrian called, it was to ask if I could contribute to a new crib they were buying because Claire had outgrown the bassinet. The one they wanted was $450. They were short because Stephanie's mother was flying in for a visit and they put a lot on the credit card. Her mother was flying in for a visit. I said I'd think about it and call him back. I hung up and I sat in my kitchen and I looked at the walls of my house and I thought about all the times I had said yes. Every single time. Every deposit, every transmission, every kitchen renovation, every engagement photographer. The blanket I made with my own hands that earned 1 sun emoji. I called him back 2 days later and I said, "I'm not going to be able to help with the crib." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Oh, okay, is everything all right?" I said, "I'm going to need you to hear something, Adrian. Not as a complaint, just as something true." I had practiced this. I had written notes on a piece of paper and then thrown the paper away and practiced without notes. I said, "When I came to visit in December, I sat in your driveway for 4 hours total. I held Claire for 17 minutes. I drove 5 hours round trip. I brought a casserole and a blanket I made by hand. And I haven't heard from you since, except about the crib." He was quiet. I said, "I love you. I love Claire more than I have words for her, but I've been making myself very small for a very long time, and I don't think it's helping either of us." He said, "Mom, I didn't know you felt that way." I said, "I know. That's partly my fault. I've been too easy to disappoint." He didn't know what to do with that. I could hear it in the silence. Adrian had always been good at many things, but sitting inside difficult things was not one of them. He said he was sorry, that things had been overwhelming, that Stephanie's family dynamics were complicated and he was just trying to keep the peace. I said, "I know, but keeping the peace in your house shouldn't mean losing me." We hung up and I didn't hear from him for 11 days. Those 11 days were some of the longest of my life, and also, strangely, some of the quietest. I called Patrice. I started going back to the gym, something I had dropped off after Gerald died. I reorganized my kitchen. I went through old photographs, not looking for anything in particular, just looking. There's one of Gerald and me at Adrian's college graduation. Gerald has his arm around me and we're both squinting into the sun, laughing at something. I don't even remember what. Adrian is a few feet ahead of us, already turning to find his friends. We are already being left behind in that photo, and we didn't even know it, and we were still so happy. Adrian called on the 12th day. He said he had talked to Stephanie. He said they both wanted to do better. He said he missed me. I believed him. Adrian has always been, underneath everything, a boy who means what he says. The problems have never been about what he means. They've been about what he does and what he lets happen and how long he waits before he notices. I said I would visit again in the spring. He said he'd make sure the date was clear just for me. No other plans. I started to say something else. Then I stopped. There's a version of this story where I tell you I let him have it, where I said everything I'd stored up over the years, every yes that should have been no, every time I swallowed the thing I actually felt and replaced it with a casserole, every emoji, every parking lot. That would be satisfying to hear, maybe. I know that, but that's not what happened. What happened is that I said I'd see him in the spring, and I meant it. And I also meant something else that I didn't say out loud. That I was done being the person who makes herself invisible to keep the peace. That I would still love him fully. But I would stop shrinking. I haven't sent money since December. He hasn't asked again. I don't know if Stephanie knows about that phone call or what she makes of it. I don't know what will happen in the spring, whether things will be different or whether I'll find myself sitting in another driveway in a different season, waiting. What I know is this. I have a granddaughter named Claire, and she is remarkable, and I intend to be in her life in a real way, not a convenient way. I am 64 years old. Gerald is gone. The kids are grown. The house is mine. I don't have time anymore for 17 minutes. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately. Not in a dramatic way, not lightning bolt moments or dramatic reckonings, just the quiet, ordinary way that what we do accumulates over time into what we get. I spent decades saying yes to Adrian, and I told myself that was love, and it was partly, but it was also something else. It was me teaching him, very patiently, very consistently, that I didn't require much, that I could be managed, that a sun emoji was enough. That's on me. I have to be honest about that. There's something nobody tells you about being a giving person. After a while, the people around you stop noticing you're giving. It just becomes the weather. Expected. Unremarkable. You drive 2.5 hours and you sit in a driveway and you hold your granddaughter for 17 minutes and it registers as normal. Not because Adrian is a bad person. I don't believe he is, but because I trained him to see me that way. I made generosity so automatic, so unconditional, so thoroughly without limit that it stopped having any weight. The things we never say yes to are the things people learn to ask for carefully. The things we always say yes to, they stop asking. They just assume. That's the part I've had to sit with. The part that isn't comfortable, because it's easier to be angry at Stephanie, easier to count the emoji, easier to measure the minutes I held Claire and feel the injustice of it. And the injustice is real. I'm not dismissing it. What happened in that driveway in December was wrong. But wrong things don't appear from nothing. They grow in soil that's been prepared for them, sometimes by our own hands. What I've learned, what I'm still learning, is that intelligence without honesty is just cleverness. And cleverness will talk you into swallowing things you shouldn't. I was clever about my own pain for years. I reframed it, smoothed it over, found the generous interpretation. My son is tired. My son is busy. My son means well. All of those things were true. And none of them changed what was happening. The honest thing, the thing that took me until I was 64 years old to say out loud, is that I had needs too. That I was a person, not just a resource. That my time and my hands and my presence had value, and not just the kind you measure in casseroles and crocheted blankets. Grit isn't only for hard times. Sometimes grit is just the daily decision to stop making yourself small, to stop rehearsing the difficult conversation and actually have it, to drive home in the dark with a casserole still in your cooler and decide, somewhere on Route 40 with the snow coming down, that you were done being easy to overlook. I don't know how the spring will go. I genuinely don't. Adrian said the right things, and I believe he meant them. And I also know that meaning something and doing something are two different muscles. And some people have never had to build the second one. But I know who I am now in a way I didn't before. I know I can say no. I know I can wait 11 days in the quiet of my own house and not fall apart. I know that love, real love, the kind worth having, doesn't ask you to disappear. Claire is out there in the world, growing. I intend to be a grandmother who is actually present in her life. Not a name in a text. Not a blanket with no sender. Not someone who waits in the car. I've waited long enough.